Now let's try it. That seemed to work. Okay, yeah, I guess this works. All right. Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Well, yeah, if we need to retrace any ground, happy to do it. So I did pull up the JAK2 doc and have like some of my runs on, queued on YouTube in case I need to scrub through and find something. So. I take it this is going to largely be like question and answer, right? Where you give me prompts. Okay, that's good. I'm more than happy to do sort of like a call and response. I'd much prefer that actually. So I had Jak 2 was sort of like the quasi first speed game I ever did, because when I was in college, I had dabbled in speedrunning, and I was sitting around with my roommates and thought like, well, like what game like could I do? And then we all sort of like landed on Jak 2, and I sort of passively learned it for a while, and kind of near the end of my senior year, I thought like I'm just gonna sit down and just go for an any percent run and just try it, and kind of hammered that out, and it was really kind of fun and kind of like a full circle moment where I was like, I'd spent a lot of time learning it. I had never done anything like that, so it was really cool. And then I sort of walked away from it for a while, and then I had actually picked up a different game as like I guess my first serious like speed game, which was Link's Awakening DX. And I had done that one for actually like about a year and a half prior, and I'd spent a lot of time on that, and that had kind of oriented me to like the world of speedrunning, and I was kind of already like familiarized and acclimated at that point, when I sort of had this itch to like move on to like a new game. And one of my friends from before, who had kind of like watched me do the Jak stuff, suggested like, you should just pick that back up, you already know the route. So then I sort of did, and I tried it again, and then I think that was like 2016 or maybe really early 2017 when I had picked it back up, and sort of just try to update myself since the last time I had done it, and kind of see what had changed and what was new. Yeah, I guess that's how I kind of started. Yeah, there was. Oh, sorry. There was definitely like an established scene, at that point. Even when I was prior, like I think maybe when I was like 2015, when I was kind of sort of like dabbling in it, there was still kind of a developing scene. Like you already had people like you had Ricky, who had done it. I think it was. I don't think it was a GDQ run. I think it was an ESA run that I kind of like modeled my run after, that I had took notes from, and it was like a 120 something. And you already had like Ricky on the scene. Vaser was obviously like tenured at that point. Tom Jack wasn't really around, but was like, just recently, he still had a lot of really relevant, like timely work that was still like active around at that time. And then by the time I had rejoined and kind of like picked it back up, there was certainly like a developed scene. You had people like Pickleberry, who I think was pretty much, Yeah, he was an established runner. In the other Jack games, like all three, the trilogy was sort of fleshed out with its like early kind of crew. You had Josh on Jack 1. He already had like tutorials out for that game at that point. Headstrong, obviously, he had people like Qatar, who was kind of invaluable to Jack 1. And yeah, I guess the concurrent runners, the really active people at the time I joined, were probably Vaser, Piggle, and I think maybe Ouija had just sort of gone on a little bit of a hiatus. I didn't actually see him around much at the time, but those two names, Vaser and Piggle, I think were kind of the two more kind of active, kind of around, kind of doing runs and stuff that I was aware of. Yeah. I yeah, yeah. Hmm. Right, right. There's there's definitely a dynamic with this trilogy. It's about the same, and I would actually say that it hasn't changed a lot, really. And I'd say it's kind of what you'd expect, where Jack 1 really is this, and rightfully so. Jack 1 is a very popular speed game. It's really intricate. There's a lot to talk about with Jack 1, and kind of the same with Jack 2. But I'd say that just like the history of Jack 1, it's a very it's a lush history. You got all these skips. You have all these like fabled skips that then get found, and it's like this huge deal. Like these holy grails that are constantly getting, figured out. And I'd say Jack 2 was sort of like the middle child in the sense that it wasn't as complicated, but it also had this kind of lore to it of being one of like the hardest Jack game because it simply was just the longest at even at the point when I was running it any percent. Jack 3 had already been sort of, I think, broken at that point. You had like the roll jump route through the desert and essentially just a very broken route. And then Jack 1 had already reached sub-hour. You had the no LTS route, and then you had lava tube skip, which actually I think it was not. I think when I had begun running Jack more seriously, I don't think the lava tube skip thing was really fully fleshed out, but it was kind of on the cusp. And then at that point, Jack 2, I think, was yet to be sub-hour any percent, and that was sort of its big, like, kind of talking point, was that it's like, oh, okay, we're sort of behind. But at the same time, it seemed like it garnered more attention than Jack 3 did. Jack 3, I would actually say, for whatever reason, maybe just didn't have the same steam as it might have now at the time. I'd say they're all three have very fleshed out now, but Jack 2 definitely, like, it sort of had this rep of being kind of like hard in like a maybe an unfun way, I guess, is maybe like when people called it hard, like obviously Jack 1 and 3 are hard, but Jack 2 maybe had some like really RNG stuff and like really like random elements and stuff that just seemed kind of brutal, I guess. And I guess, yeah, it's in terms of the dynamic between the three, I'd say it was sort of in the middle. It was like very approachable, but not really the face of like Jack running. But even then, I'd say it was kind of a pick your poison thing. Like it wasn't like people like if someone came in and didn't know what to run, I don't think people would default to any given one. It really came down to which one do you like the most, and which I think is probably the best way to kind of do that. So. Yeah, yeah. There's sort of this kind of reality you have to kind of like a pill you got to swallow, where it's like I don't know, you got to live with it. Like it's just the game. Sometimes it'll crash. It'll have like it'll hard lock. It'll do something, and you got to kind of just roll with those punches. And I mean, there's some famous crashes. Like I remember Unreal had a run that was like on record pace, and it crashed in the final fight, and that was like the most like saddest thing ever. But you got to kind of laugh it off. And then I think the same thing happened to Headstrong, and it's like. I guess maybe the camaraderie of it makes it a little easier to to deal with because everyone's having the same problem. So it's like, yeah, that's Jack. Yeah, it's sort of, we're all just in it together in that sense. So it's like, yeah. And people will like really back each other up and be like, no, that run was sick. Should have PB'd or should have done this or that. And it's like kind of cool. Like people are like, that was a great run. And, it sucks, but they like recognize it. So. Yeah, yeah. The it's yeah, it's super funny. Like it's kind of like it's you kind of take like the progression of like skips where you usually think it's small to big. We kind of like Jack 2 is kind of an upside down pyramid where it's like yeah, you start with Mars Tomb skip and then you've already cut off 2/3 of the game. And then everything else is sort of like these like elusive and clever tricks, but like, it can't it's if you're by the numbers, it's not on the same scale. So it's I'd say it's um more or less kind of how I would broad stroke it is that the routing wasn't as much of this kind of thing that was in flux. It was mostly like I guess maybe techniques were kind of a bigger influencer on like the record and the times and stuff and things like finding the hover, which I guess by the time I joined it was already kind of more or less integrated into the run, but stuff like that, like certain checkpoint like I don't know if Ouija talked about checkpoint like reloads and resets and stuff like that, or mission storage, but things that sort of like kind of discreetly change A to B moments like in the run, like not so much macro changes, I guess, was like really the bread and butter of like the research and the hunting and stuff in the game. But yeah, like in general, I'd say when I started running and by the time I had sort of kind of maybe it was sort of moving on, I wouldn't say the route was different in any like profound way, maybe a few tiny little edits, but no, it was like the route, like you could rattle off the major points and it would be the same. Yeah, that was sort of my summer of Jack, where yeah, I'd gotten that record, the first one. Yeah, and honestly, I would say that GDQ has this effect of really motivating someone to like I wanted to sort of present the best time I could when I was at GDQ. So it was really validating. I think that was just a month shy of GDQ, I think, when I had gotten that record. So I was really gunning for that. And I think that sort of helped get me there. I think, like, knowing I was going to be presenting the game, I was really excited about that. So, like, yeah. And then from there, I kind of was able to, I wanted to keep sharp on it. So I kind of kept running it and stuff. And yeah, tried to see where I could go from there. I may have had that 10116 before getting accepted. It was all kind of right around the same time. It was the 10153, I think, which I had, or the 153. I had gotten the sub 101, I think, or by the time I was at GDQ. But yeah, it was like right around that same time. And I guess I was just really like into it and feeling it, and whether or not I had gotten accepted or not, but I definitely submitted and I was like really jazzed about it. So yeah. And I'd say I put hours in that over those months. Like, I was grinding, like I was on like a, capital T or capital G grind of like, just like, I would get home from work, I'd do all my dailies, and then I would really just like hunker down and like try to get there. So which is pretty fun. I don't think I've ever done anything quite to that degree, even in speedrunning before. So it was. Mhm. You know, I I guess I personally don't know if I've ever tried to qualify myself in that respect of like I guess I don't know. But if I had to think about it, I'm sort of I mean I sort of have like a music background, I guess. So I spend a lot of time like practicing something before like performing it, I guess, if that makes I don't know. I'm trying to think of a way to like kind of relate that, but and I think I was really a practicer where like I guess I don't, not to say people don't practice, but I mean I would like I had a lot of like off stream I would just sit there and kind of jetboard around the city and practice little hovers and like repeat things over and over. And I guess I really like enjoyed like the repetition of like segment practice. And I guess I don't know if I would call myself a grinder really in that respect. I sort of had these little bursts, like I was more of a sprinter, where like I would, yeah, I guess that's what I would say. I was like, I would really prep myself, and I would really like get these things under my fingers and like figure it out, and then I would think, okay, now I feel like I can do it, and I'm at a point of competency where I think I can just go, and I just would just kind of go hard on it for however long. And with this, in this case, I feel like I really did kind of get somewhere I was happy with, so it worked out. Um, I guess how I could say is definitely. I don't know if I truly like burned out on speedrunning per se. I guess extenuating circumstances kind of affected my ability to contribute to the speedrunning world as much. Kind of moving on from there, and I guess I don't know how to like say it beyond that. I guess, but just it wasn't something I was able to prioritize as much past that. And it's something I've always sort of kept at arm's length, and I really like keeping up on the speedrun community. And I still dabble in games. And actually I had an opportunity kind of again to revisit speedrunning in a more like you know serious way since then, kind of during the pandemic. So it's just something I really love and enjoy, and I don't think it's ever like been out of my life. It's been kind of hard to keep up with, and because of that, I think I've sort of I guess I would call it like a seasonal thing at this point. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. That yes, that was Orlando. Yep. That was a race with Headstrong, and that was a really cool like return to form because I think it was sort of this weird quasi thing where I was thinking about maybe submitting it, or someone had mentioned that I should try because um people weren't sure who was submitting anything, and it was sort of up in the air, and I thought, well, I have nothing to lose, so I just submitted it. And then that evolved into like Headstrong was also submitting, and then we actually were trying to get a three-way race. We wanted Septerna in there, and that didn't pan out, but then we opted to just go for the two-person. And yeah, super super fun. Really. Wow. Well, that so Universal's fun. Sorry you had to like babysit people's stuff, but glad you caught the run, I suppose. I mean, it's still an outing with friends, and it's you see stuff. It's cool. It's like there's there's sort of this like altruistic kind of satisfaction where you're just like doing my part, and they're having fun. Hmm. No worries. Well, just that's easy. That's legit. Making it easy. It's on my to do list is getting to Orlando someday. The studio, the park. Yeah, I've always wanted to. I didn't know they had a Simpsons thing. Whoa. Yeah, I had no idea actually. Something like that. I forget. Hmm. You mean like for like my runs, or I guess I do remember when I got the 153. I feel like I remember at the time, even after that, I would tell people like I had PB'd since then, but I would say like my favorite one was my sub 101, the first one. Like I guess I recall specifically saying that where like like people would be like, "Oh, that's a sick time," and I'd be like, "Yeah," like, or they would ask me like, "Is that like everything must have gone super good in this run or that run?" And I thought, "Yeah," but I think for some reason, like how everything shook out, the 153 just felt like like the run I just liked the most. It worked out well, and it had some like hiccups, but it was like, yeah, I don't know. I guess I would say that was like my favorite run that I'd personally done. Um, it and I guess it had that sort of milestone element to it where I had broken past the 101 barrier, and I think I'd been particularly fixated on that, and it was just overall felt like a good reflection of my skill at the time. And in general, beyond that, if I had to think of a run that was particularly exciting, I'd probably say, well, I was very present for a lot of Headstrong's grind, and I'd probably say, like Headstrong sub 1 was obviously super hype, things like that. Like those obvious answers, I guess, is what I would say. Maybe it's kind of boring, but I don't know. Those milestone runs always get me super excited, and usually there's a great amount of strife preceding them. Grinding and getting almost there or not quite there and stuff. So I was super. It was super cool seeing Jack 1 or Jack 2 get to sub 1, kind of being able to kind of be around for that. That was kind of something you can't do again in this game. So it is cool. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I I guess I'm trying. I was trying to think before the interview, like what sort of stuff came up during my time as like having the record, like what sort of updates. And it's funny. I don't think the run got necessarily terribly updated when I was running. And I was sort of trying to think, like, a lot of hovers already been established. I think we had found just a couple little cute little time saves and clever things here and there. When I had come back, actually, was where I had maybe some more interesting updates had happened, but that was long after. So yeah, I guess that was something I was sort of thinking. Like, if I was like, oh, if they asked me like what was found, I was thinking like I genuinely am not sure how much it changed from when and I think we already sort of did cover that because you asked me like about the route, and yeah, the route was largely the same. Yeah, it was more just like a time, and I think we even commented on this at the time, how it was like we were really just trying to catch up to what was already known. Like we really felt like Jack 2 was a game that was like the potential in what the knowledge base far surpassed what we had sort of performed like RTA at the time. So there was there was just, that was kind of the hype, I guess, was like we all knew sub 1 could happen, we all were super sure it could happen, all this stuff. So I guess lap skips was sort of right on the tail end, but I think Septerna had already sort of really gotten to the front of the pack at that point, but that was probably the biggest thing around then, I think. Mm-hmm. talk shit about. Yeah, I got a bone to pick with this person. No, I'm just kidding. But nah, I don't know. It's I can. Man, I wish I could have ever communicated with Tom Jack. I've never exchanged any manner of communication with him. So, but yeah, that definitely like, huge respect for him though. I just, by the time I was around, he wasn't really super vocal. But yeah, no, I don't know. I'd say there isn't. I certainly hope most communities are kind of like that, where people can't really speak too much towards conflict. Um, no, I'd say, well, Headstrong, it's hard to call her an upstart, really. When, yeah, I mean, she had a lot of background in, Jack, and the game engines or the movements are largely idiosyncratic between the games. So it's like, I remember I had actually sort of been the one who kind of coached her through a lot of Jack 2, because it was part of this like kind of surprise trifecta project she was doing. And so I kind of like walked her through the route and tried to get her to a point where she could kind of just do any percent and kind of get through it for that trifecta. Um, and and then with Smoker was definitely like kind of around. I think he had times on the board. He was I think he was top 10 for a good amount of time when I was like active, or not long after that. And he was definitely like a contender the whole time. So it wasn't surprising to see him and Headstrong kind of, I think they were the two that kind of really started pioneering it right around lap skips, getting, inching ever closer to the sub one. So like none of that was surprising really. It was, it was really cool to actually see them kind of pull through, because they were definitely on the docket, I guess, to get there. Um, yeah, no, but both of them were, I really respected for in terms of their what they had demonstrated in the game at that point. So I'd say if anything, Septerna was the one who kind of like leveled up, like we like once, then twice, then thrice, and then it was like, oh man, like this guy's really good. He's just like, it's like he has like a switch where he just decides like, I think I will do this, and then he just does it, and it kind of plays out sort of in the way that you'd expect, where like he was always pretty good. He was very competent, and he was active in the community and learning. He was a student of Jack 2 for like a while, I feel like, and he was kind of like, that sounds weird to say, but you know what I mean, like where someone's kind of learning and they're picking up tricks, and I don't know, it's just, I guess I sort of I didn't think he couldn't, but I guess it just seemed like really quickly he decided he wanted to really grind the game. He decided he had picked like a goal for himself. And then I think it was like, couldn't have been more than half a year when he went from like, maybe sub 110 to, being either having the record or contending for it. It was like really fast. And then it did start to become sort of like, we all knew it was in him, when he got the sub one. And then I think he got the first 58, 57, I think. Like he was chiseling it down, and it was like unstoppable, like how he would chisel the time down repeatedly. And so he definitely had like the mental for it, because like we had said, this game is just kind of brutal in a way that doesn't really seem like it reflects your skill. It can just kind of, it giveth and taketh away, however it wants. And I don't know, it just didn't seem to discourage him. It certainly didn't stop him from getting these like milestones. So it's pretty cool. It really seemed that way. it really just seemed like he decided, like, I think I'll get sub 1, I think I'll get 58, I think I'll get 57, and then it's like, yeah. Like, he got it. It's really, really cool. And then obviously, yeah, there was like that whole legend of how he had dropped the game for a while. I think he dabbled in some other stuff, kind of, playing around. And then one day he kind of picked interest back up in Jak 2, and I think it was like within that span of a couple weeks he had reclaimed the record. He brought it down some other, a novel margin of time, and it was like, I don't know how he does it. It's impressive. Yeah. I really think he just has like a good mind for it. I think he seems like he tends to kind of persevere, I think. Yeah. Well, it was definitely like the kind of the catalyst for her interest in it, because I think I even remember when we were sort of passively learning it. I wouldn't say it was more like it was sort of a jokey idea to run the game, because I think she was pretty vocal about how she didn't like that game, like, casually, and how like, understandably, it does have a lot of differences from Jak 1. And I don't know, it's just like everyone, it seems like a really binary thing with a lot of people, where they'll say, no, I don't care for Jak 2 or 3, I like the first one, or people will be like, no, I prefer those ones. And so it was like, whatever. But then, I guess for whatever reason, it just really resonated with her as like, I guess I don't want to say how she felt about something, but I recall she had mentioned that it really felt better as a speed run. And I recall she just seemed to really like, that kind of turned her around on it, like, in terms of like playing the game. I don't think she really stopped running it for a while after she had learned it for the trifecta. Like, she definitely did like that project, and then from there, I think, it just kind of kept going, at least until like sub 1 and the 58 and stuff. Yeah, I'd say it was. Yeah, I really think it was just the context of it. Yeah, because I remember a similar sentiment being shared, where it just wasn't her style of thing. But then, I don't know. Jak 2 has a lot to offer. It's at least when you're speedrunning it, it's very much like a movement game. It's a physics game. You have cool stuff. So it's got a little bit of something all over the spectrum. Oh, that's fine. I think maybe I guess I didn't understand your original prompt, but I think it sort of went over my head. So about the talking shit, I was like, oh, I don't want to do that, but I understand. I'm sorry. I guess I'm sure I'll think of something at some point, but for like, really, I think it seems like I got to talk about the other runners in the whole thing, and I got to talk about my time picking it up. So I don't know. I feel pretty good about that. I'm sorry if I sort of talked fast. I think I sort of noticed myself doing that right at the end. But other than that, just crank down the time scale. Well, I guess I sort of have a few depending on like how I want the angle I want to take that question. Like in terms of like holy grails, I guess I would probably say like this thing called con site skip is sort of like it's almost like a meme, I guess. It's like this. It's a similar in concept to Mars Tomb skip, where it's like a cutscene trigger, some sort of progression trigger that's just sort of existing, indefinitely. It's always there, and you just have to get to it. Except it has all that, except for the fact that the flag for the progression trigger doesn't exist until you satisfy other stuff. But it really seems like it ought to, and actually, in a demo of the game, it does work. You can like get to the con site is like this kind of ending part of the game. Like right before you go to the final boss, you go to this area just to watch a cutscene, and it's that cutscene that we were always kind of hoping we could figure out a way to trigger. But it would effectively make the run like a 10-minute run. It would also kind of turn into kind of more of like a jokey category, but it would be super validating to one day see that, especially because there's like I think versions of the game where such a thing is kind of possible, but post release it was like something had changed. So I guess that's like the big find probably would be the most, like in terms of time save, the most significant. And then my sort of like fun answer that I think is it'd be cool if there was more tech that really kept Jack on the jetboard more in the game. Like if there were cool physics stuff, because I know Jack 3 kind of has that where you can get some kind of, cool boosts and, effects with like the slowdown mechanic that kind of gets you going really fast. And I think it would be cool if there was something like that in Jack 2 where you could really just go ham on the jet board. Maybe if checkpoints weren't so kind of finicky, you could hover more over more stuff and kind of, I guess, really if there was tech that really like put that at the front of the run, like jetboard stuff would be pretty cool. I guess those are like my fun answer, and then I guess my more like technical answer. Um, I guess I have things to offer about it. Yeah, I wasn't really around during the inception of it, but I guess really generally I recall that it, like a lot of tricks, it wasn't well understood at the time, and to the point where I think the general like way to do it sort of was like you jump in the air, you hold this button, and then you kind of mash the analog stick around until it just happens, because it does involve like kind of a more nuanced movement of the analog stick, but they hadn't really figured that out yet. And because of that, it was like I think they had even known about it and theorized what it could do for a while, but certainly weren't implementing it because just the consistency was practically zero. Yeah. So the names that pop into my head are this runner named Unreal and Ricky, who I think were the two main people who were kind of on it for that. I think inevitably I feel like Vaser probably was there too. But I remember Unreal at the time was kind of, had sort of a dominance, and it was kind of around the hover, I think, and he had sort of gotten really comfortable with it. So I think he may have been one of the people who kind of figured it out, so to speak, him and Ricky. Yeah, Unreal is a really interesting element to the history, I'd say. It was right around then, the hover. Cool. Awesome. I hope that was kind of good for your stuff. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to talk about that stuff. So I have my odd. Okay, I'm gonna cut my Audacity as well, and then I can probably